Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Welcome to another episode of Unscripted with Russo. I'm your host, Ashley Russo, and I am here with Dawn Godshall. Dawn is the Executive Director of Community Action Lehigh Valley. Dawn, thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Dawn, I was so fortunate to hear you speak on a panel recently for International Women's Day, and you were so empowering. I loved everything about what you had to say with your messaging and your background. So I have wanted to meet you, and I thought, what better way to do that than to share it with our audience here today?
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood and growing up. I believe you're from Buffalo, New York. And what kind of kid were you? Tell me a little bit about your family and the type of child that you were.
I was the youngest of three daughters. My mom and dad were a biracial couple. And so it was always very interesting growing up because we always had that dynamic of, what did you feel you were growing up and where did you feel accepted? But my father, who had only gone through sixth grade, he spoke 4 different languages. And so he was very self-educated and he believed in education. And because we grew up in poverty, he always taught us that education was the best way out of poverty. So no matter what he had to do, he paid for us to we went to Catholic schools growing up. I had the best penmanship in the world.
You can tell nowadays, right, who went to Catholic school based on penmanship alone. Although I'm sad to say my children have gone to 12 years of Catholic school and have still resorted to print despite cursive still being used. But I guess it's a digital world. I'm so curious, how did your dad learn 4 languages despite not going to school? I mean, I'm always fascinated. How do people learn languages, especially before they could pick up a phone and listen to it?
My dad was really unique in that he ran away from home. I don't recommend this to anyone, but he ran away from home at a very young age and he joined the circus. And so he followed.
So that's an actual thing people do.
People do that. I really thought it was a fallacy, but it was true. And he traveled everywhere the circus went. And his last travel, if you will, he ended up in South Jersey and was raised by the Italian families in South Jersey. And so his strongest language was Italian, although he spoke German and Spanish as well, in addition to English. So,
wow, that's really incredible. I know that you lost your mom at a young age. Tell me a little bit about that time in your life. And you were pretty young. So how did that shape your early childhood, say your grammar school years?
Yeah. Well, I lost my mom when I was about 5. But my dad was a really good father and he believed in raising us with good morals and values and ethics. And we had to be responsible at a very young age. So we cooked and cleaned at 6, 7, and 8 years old because we were the women of the household, if you will. But it made us stronger. It made us be really empowered young women because we weren't afraid to just kind of take control of a household and do what needed to be done.
Such an incredible turn to take something that is so sad and so challenging, but empower you and your sisters in such a meaningful way. When you think about your childhood, being the youngest, going through what you went through, how would you describe yourself? What were some of your attributes? What were things that you loved and took to kind of naturally? And what were other things that maybe you were challenged by?
Well, the things I think I was really good at was I was a good listener because we were sort of sheltered. My dad, when he would have adults over to the house, we kind of learned early on that if you wanted to know what was happening, you listened a lot and you didn't say a lot, so that the adults didn't really realize you were in the room. And so we learned quite a bit, just sort of being those old souls that people could talk to. So I was the person in my school that other kids would come to share what was going on in their lives, because they knew that I had gone through a bit in my own life. So we sort of used that, all of us, to be those strong voices amongst our peers growing up. And then at age 12, I was 12, we were stair steps. So it was 12, 13, 14 was when we lost our dad.
So heartbreaking, Dawn. I mean, that must have been such a challenging time for you and your sisters to have that kind of, the world fall out from under you and have that unknown. And what happened next? I know that you were in the foster care system and you really learned to lean on education. Were you and your sisters placed together?
No, we were all separated and really did not reunite until we were adults. We were 17, 18, 19, almost adults. And but it initially it was very hard. But our dad had trained us. This is unique. And again, I don't advocate that people's lives be this way, but he was always very afraid of the system coming to take us away as a single parent. And so he really taught us, he sheltered us, and he taught us how to be self-sufficient. So he had a bad heart. And so he would go into the hospital for a couple of weeks at a time, but he did not want others to know that we were living at home alone. So we had this set up with a local store that if we had needs in the house, we could call and put it on my father's tab and they would deliver the groceries to the home. So we had to go to school every day and never let anyone know that we were living alone as children. So it really kind of sheltered us to, we were very responsible kids, I should say. We went to school every day. We did our homework, because if you didn't do your homework, it raised a red flag to the teachers to then call your parent who was not home. So we couldn't let them know that. So we really learned to be very self-sustaining as really young kids.
It's so remarkable in every way, to be honest with you. I mean, to hear your story and think there are so many things that kids are not empowered to do, are not given responsibility. And then when they are, don't take it seriously. And you and your sisters did the opposite of all of those things. So what a credit to your parents in raising you that way. And, despite what was going on. Tell me about education. I know that was super important to you. How challenging did it become for education to be your priority once you were in the system, so to speak? And what challenges did you face that maybe kids every day that you saw at school were not facing?
Well, I took it so seriously that when I would go home, I would do my homework first. Like, that was really important to me, so that when I went to school, I was not behind, that I knew what was going on. And so I transitioned through quite a few foster homes initially, because there are foster parents out there who aren't good foster parents. They're there for the money. They want that foster child because it's an income for them. But I did land up in a family when I was, I believe, a sophomore in high school. It was a pastor and his wife, the Krauses, and they raised me until I went to college. And because I continued to be diligent in school, my high school graduation, I didn't know it, but I won about 3 different scholarships to college during that last graduation day. And it was it was a great day.
It sounds like an amazing day, Dawn, and a day you should be very proud of. I love your message about the importance of education in the face of adversity, and really outstanding. I want to know more about what you did next, because you have had an illustrious career and it did start with education. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Unscripted with Russo.
time to take your workout outdoors. Discover Lehigh Valley is a great resource for finding easily accessible nature trails with stunning views and challenging terrain. Whether you're exploring the Delaware and Lehigh Trail or going for a jog on the Ironton Rail Trail, explore Discover Lehigh Valley to get you started. Follow them on Instagram, Lehigh Valley PA.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I'm being joined today by such an incredible woman, Dawn Godshall. She's the Executive Director of Community Action Lehigh Valley. Dawn is telling us a little bit about growing up in Buffalo, New York, being the youngest of three, and really losing both her parents at a young age. However, being instilled with such amazing work ethic, responsibility, sense of self that carried you through those teen years, taking you to graduation, Dawn, winning scholarships. Tell me what was next, because you went on to multiple schools. I think you started in pharmacy and ended up in media. So what were you thinking at that time? And had you seen anything happen with your sisters or foster siblings that inspired you? Kind of, how did you figure out what to do next?
Well, I always loved to write. And so in high school, I was the editor of the school newspaper. But I had promised my father for many years that I would be a pharmacist because he was always so sick. I wanted to know what all those pills were that he took. So I started out at Albany College of Pharmacy, where I was the class president, and I was also the editor of the school newspaper. However, I realized that I didn't really want to be a pharmacist. I loved right. So I left pharmacy and went into journalism. So I went back to Buffalo. I worked for the Buffalo News for a little while, and then decided I wanted to go to New York City and work for ABC News. So they didn't have any openings in news at the time. But there was an opening as a secretary at ABC Sports. So I took that job. They didn't want to give it to me because they told me I was overqualified. I don't like when people do that. But I worked for ABC Sports for a couple of years, which was so much fun. I got to work Monday Night Football. I got to, be on the 50-yard line of Monday Night Football games and do, the various other sports that they had. But as soon as an opening came in news, I began to work at ABC News. And so I became a producer and then transitioned to ABC in Philadelphia, which is WPVI.
How important was it for you to say yes to any opportunity that would get you to New York? Because I think, we talk about, also went to school for journalism, also took a job at the rival NBC, and I didn't care what the job was. It actually didn't matter. I remember, as an intern, you'd run the tape and the film back and forth. Like that was the big thing, to go to the tape library. And it was so exciting. Like every time I took the elevator or went in the hallways, just to think who had walked there before me. But it's because you said yes to something that maybe wasn't what you had pictured, but you knew it was a first step. So how important was that yes for you?
Extremely important. And I tell people all the time who come to work for me, I see this younger generation, if you will. They work a job for 5 months and they want a promotion and a raise. And sometimes you have to pay your dues, and sometimes you need to be diligent in something that may not necessarily be where you want to end up, to show people your work ethic, to show people how serious you are about something. And so taking an opportunity in a field in sports, which honestly, at the time, I could have cared less about sports, but I learned to love it because it taught me so much. I worked for some really wonderful people. And then when an opportunity presented itself, when that time is right. And so you go for that, but you learn your lessons along the way. You glean from all of those different people who come into your life, and each one of them teaches you something different. Some of them you learn because they taught you something you don't want to do. It's like, I don't ever want to be like that, but you learned from it, and that's what's important.
I think that is so incredibly critical. I'm laughing when you're saying about sports, because I was actually the sports director for WNYU's radio station, and my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, couldn't believe that they would give me this job because I knew nothing about sports. I said, it has nothing to do with sports. It has to do with producing and managing people. And that's what it did. So I didn't, I think that idea of talking about younger people always wanting to get the thing, instead of just taking a step forward and seeing who you meet, what you learn, moving forward in some capacity is so important. Tell me about
they want immediate gratification.
Yeah.
And that's not always possible. Sometimes you have to learn along the way before you can get
well, we're hopeful that one of the purposes that we accomplish on this podcast is to help people, especially younger people who have given me a lot of feedback, understand that where someone is when you meet them in their career is not where they started. And this concept that all of these little actions through your childhood and through high school and through college and through your early career add up to the person that we now see before us today in you. So when you think about that, were there some things that you gleaned from those more difficult years in high school and foster care and those struggling years through college that you took with you as life lessons that really helped you make your mark early on in television?
When I was a child, Martin Luther King, his daughter Yolanda, spoke at my school. And she gave me such encouragement and such hope, because there were times as, an orphan that, you feel sorry for yourself, like, okay, this is not a good day and I'm sad. But when you listen to people, even like yourself, who can encourage others, who can tell them it's going to be okay, stick it out, don't give up, those are the kinds of lessons that I learned through school and through my childhood. And one of the things that my childhood taught me and that I'm working on right now is the fact that kids need a safe place to go, to be, to have fun. And so one of the things that Community Action is attempting to do right now is to build a youth center in Allentown so that kids in Allentown can have a place to go to do their homework. And that will be a requirement. You have to do your homework before you can play games. And so the homework is a part of it, but then they can learn how to create music and do video production and all of the wonderful things that come along with, that we're trying to put in this youth center. So there will be basketball and soccer and football and all those cool things to have fun, but you have to do your homework. And so we're going to have tutors and homework help so that kids, when they go to school the next day, they're confident. They don't have to worry about what happens in school or being embarrassed because they got their work done. So that's really important to me. Those lessons along the way were really important to put into this youth center that we're creating.
I love that. And I want to ask you about your transition from news media into the nonprofit world, because you've done quite a bit, especially here in the Lehigh Valley, having worked for Family Answers, Allentown Rescue Mission, and now Community Action Lehigh Valley. You also, along the way, you raised 2 children, I understand. And I just, tell me a little bit about that time. When did you know it was time to leave Philadelphia to come to the Lehigh Valley? Tell me a little bit about that transition for you.
Well, we bought, my husband then, and I bought a home in Palmer Township, and it was a beautiful home, and we could not have gotten such a great house for the price that we paid. So it was my intention initially to commute back and forth to Philly. However, I ended up in the middle of an unexpected divorce. And so that took me to kind of reevaluate where I was and what I was doing. And because I grew up in foster homes, I began to volunteer at the Children's Home of Easton because I wanted to just give back. And that kind of then transitioned my life into a new direction, into nonprofit. So it was sort of a destined thing that happened, but I would not trade it for the world.
Funny, right? Those little moments in your life that turn you to something else that you just never knew it would open a whole new door and a whole new pathway. What did you find were some of the transferable skills? And I bring this up because I meet, as I assume you do as well, a lot with people who are looking for a change. And they're in a transitional period, whether it's because of a life crisis of some kind, or they're going back to work, or they're shifting careers or locations. And they don't quite recognize that there are skills you take with you regardless of the job around you. So I want to spend a little bit of time, just a few minutes, talking about what seems on paper like a very large shift, right? From a media TV career in New York and Philly to the nonprofit world. Talk to me about those transitional skills that stuck with you and actually played into your new role and the role that you now have.
That is such a great question. I'm glad you asked. Being in journalism and knowing how to write, and again, writing well, I believe, allowed me to start doing some grant writing. From the Children's Home of Easton, they offered me a job at a program called Ways to Work. And it was a nonprofit that helped parents to get a low-income loan for a car so that they had a way to work. Well, it was not well funded. So they asked me if I could also do the grant writing. And for me, because I could write a paper, for college, it was an easy transition to see a grant, and they ask you questions and you give them back what they wanted. So I was able to, take those skills from writing to grant writing, and then did those same things at the Allentown Rescue Mission. I was doing some grant writing. I was doing some communications and marketing. So those skills that I learned in the television business took me to an easier transition into the nonprofit world that needs parts of those things as well.
And now in your role as an executive director, is this for you a culmination of so many things that have happened in your life? You talked about being able to help with after school programs and the programming you're able to influence, the youth, the families. What does this mean to you at this point in your career? What are you hoping to do? What do you want this community to know about the work that Community Action Lehigh Valley is doing in our area?
Community Action itself does so many different things. We've got 13 different programs. It would take a really long time for me to tell you about all of them. But everything that I've been through in my life, I can take a piece of that and apply it to what I'm doing now. Whether it was that tough boss that, you kind of wanted to strangle at some point, you learn how to and not to hopefully treat people. Whether it was, I started at Community Action at the 6th Street Shelter as the director. And so I had to deal with donors and participants who live there and the staff and old buildings that fell apart every time I turned around that we had to pour lots of money into. And so all of those pieces that you learn over the years from different jobs that you have, if you are smart, you take the good things and even the bad things, and you learn those, what is important. And so the years that I've spent here, I've taken at least snippets of every piece of the jobs that I've had. So my employees who work in communications, when they talk to me about something, I know what they're talking about. And the people who deal with the donors, I know what they're talking about. And, it forms your life and it makes you who you are. And so all of those things, and having grown up in foster homes and seeing the good, bad, and the ugly that can happen to children, has made this youth center so important to me. And I am just looking forward to the day where I can hug some kids at the center and have them, be appreciative that a place like that exists.
I am sure that they are appreciative. I certainly know everyone in our community is appreciative, and it's amazing to see the work that you and your team are doing. But even more so, it's amazing to me that you have made the Lehigh Valley your home, and we're so grateful for that. We're going to take a quick break, and then I want to talk about the Lehigh Valley and all the things we all love about it, especially what you think. So stick with us. You're listening to Unscripted with Russo.
Ever wonder what you get when you combine an historical riverside city, high-end dining, entertainment venues, and craft distilleries? The city of Easton, of course. One of my favorite spots is the Easton Public Market, right in the center of it all. But there's a variety of places to choose. Whether you're looking for a park to unwind or a night out with friends, check out Discover Lehigh Valley's website to find all the hot spots in Easton. Visit their website at discoverlehighvalley.com for more information.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. If you are just joining us, you need to rewind because you need to hear the very beginning of this amazing conversation with Dawn Godshall. She is the Executive Director of Community Action Lehigh Valley. Dawn has told us so much about her life, her career, and the lessons that she's learned. And she has chosen to make the Lehigh Valley her home. And Dawn, I want to ask you a little bit about that. You talked about moving, years ago to Palmer Township and raising 2 children here and being involved in this community. What do you love about the Lehigh Valley?
Well, I love that there is so much opportunity. I do think that since the murder of George Floyd, unfortunately, it brought a lot of things to light that, we've gone through some really tough political times where people who you thought you knew well, you may know so well because you really had polar opposite views on how things should go. But I love the fact that this has brought up opportunities for us to talk about race, for us to have difficult conversations that deal with diversity and equity and inclusion. And one of our programs here at Community Action is called Racial and Ethnic Justice. And it has a 5 to 7 year strategic plan called Color Outside the Lines, which seeks to have more conversations about race. And so one of the things that I love about the Lehigh Valley is that there have been so many people who have embraced a change, who have embraced being able to have conversations. I also, in my position now, I see people opening new businesses. They feel as if this is a really good time now post-COVID to sort of begin again, and they have hope, and there are enough people around who are willing to help push them and propel them through that hope to have an actual sustainable business and dreams and visions. And I think there's so many different opportunities here that people can see those visions come to fruition.
I love that you brought that up in that framework because it's a very interesting time that we are living in and living through. And the Lehigh Valley has been a place, in my experience, that really cares about community, but as you stated, was maybe unaware or unwilling to look at where there were some gaps in understanding. And have you found that people are more willing to do that? Have you found that the conversation and the people coming to the table, so to speak, to talk is changing?
It's changed for those who were willing to change. There are still some who are not, and they don't want to have the conversations that make them feel uncomfortable. They don't want to hear words that make them feel like, I didn't do this. I didn't create this thing that you're talking about, systemic racism, and they don't understand. And those who choose to open up their eyes and their heart and their ears and want to understand have been phenomenal in the process of just educating themselves about why we are where we are and how we can change that. And, I'm realistic enough to know that there are those who are closed-minded and don't want to have those conversations, but we're having more conversations with the people in the Valley who are from businesses and police departments and nonprofits and welcoming anyone who just wants to sit and have an open dialogue. I think that's important.
It feels like positive forward momentum to be having the conversations in an open way. And I love that you brought up businesses, because we have such a thriving small business community. And I have seen such an explosion of minority owned, women owned businesses in the Lehigh Valley. We try to shine a spotlight as often as we can. But it's exciting to see. What do you think when you see kind of the next generation following their dreams, looking at things differently, and really trying to change that conversation that's happening out there? It's happening at homes. It's happening at dinner tables. It's happening on boards. It's happening at fundraisers. At least I think it's starting. Certainly there's a lot of work to be done, but as you see that unraveling, what do you feel like your role is? And what do you think your advice is to people out there listening as to what each of our role needs to be?
I think our role is to be open to listen. You cannot, but I also think we have to meet people where they are. So we cannot expect someone who has been raised in a household that taught them racism, for instance, to all of a sudden embrace what's happening around them and having that conversation, unless you find out, well, why do you feel that way? And where did you learn that? And tell me a little bit about how you were raised. And we have to find out where people, what experiences they had, and sort of meet them at that place, so that it's like, oh, okay, I understand. You were raised in a household that taught you that. And so it's important for us to find out what's behind the person.
Said like a true journalist. It's fabulous advice. We mentioned businesses. Tell me some of your favorite things to do in the Lehigh Valley. What's something you have a free afternoon? It's a beautiful day out. What do you go do?
Okay, you're gonna think you're not gonna believe me, but I'm gonna tell you. I love to fish.
Wait, what kind of fishing? Like trout fishing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I like all kinds of fishing, but
I'm very close to a creek, Dawn. So maybe this would be a thing you could teach me.
Well, they stock on my property. You can always come over and we can.
All right. Now, I just want to tell you, I have a slight childhood fear of the hook, because when I was a kid, kids were fishing off a pier and they went back and they caught my hand with the hook. Yeah. I was fine. It was a ridiculously nothing injury, but you know how things. I'm also very afraid of bees, because I did a cartwheel on a bee once. Oh. These are my two fears I've never shared on this podcast, are hooks and bees. But I do enjoy the casting and the calmness of it. And there's such a sense of peace and mindfulness. What is it that attracts you to fishing?
The peace, yes. Even just to sit quietly and wait for that, that pole to jiggle, and then, something's on it. So, and my dad, one of the things that my real dad taught me growing up was to fish. I think he wished he had 3 boys, but he had 3 girls. And so he took us fishing with him. And so it's one of my favorite things to do.
I love that. My mom is an only child. And I think my grandfather also maybe wished for a boy, but had an awesome girl. And she can, archery, the rifle range, fishing. It's kind of amazing, all the things she learned to do. So I love that. What about restaurants? What is the culinary scene in the Lehigh Valley is amazing. I think it gets better every single week. What are some of your favorite places to go, or restaurants or food that you like to eat?
Because my father grew up with Italians and he was a chef. So Italian food is my absolute favorite. Not that I'm promoting them and I'm not being paid to do that, but Asante restaurant in Northampton is amazing.
I just heard about this place for the first time. And as an Italian, I feel I've been missing out that I have not been there yet. I'm a big fan of Trey Scalini in Bethlehem.
Okay.
That's another one. So, okay.
I'll have to visit there. I have not.
All right, we'll do a home and home, they call that.
Okay. Yeah. And then another thing that I like to do is go motorcycle riding. So my husband, when I met him, was he liked everything fast, and he took me on snowmobiles and motorcycles, and so it's one of the things that I really enjoy doing as well.
I love that. We'll talk about juxtaposing fishing to motorcycle riding. That's you in a nutshell, Dawn.
Peace and excitement.
You can do it all. All right. Well, before I let you go, I want to ask you our rapid fire questions. I just want to confirm for the audience, you have not heard these questions.
Okay. No, I haven't.
You have not. Okay. You ready?
Okay.
What is your favorite hobby or a secret talent that you have?
Well, my favorite hobby is fishing. I don't know that I have a secret talent aside from listening to people.
That's a good one. What's the best advice you've ever received?
When someone shows you who they are, believe them. I think that came from Oprah.
Well, she's full of good advice. All right. Which actress would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
Alicia Rashad.
If you didn't have the job you have now, what would you be doing instead? And it can't be something you've already done.
It's a difficult one because I love my job. Probably doing one of those old lady things, which is doing water aerobics in the pool at a senior place.
I love it, but let's one up it. Let's get you at like a resort somewhere.
Okay, that'll work.
All right, great. And name one person who inspires you.
Jesus Christ.
Beautiful answer. Dawn, it's been wonderful having you on Unscripted with Russo. Thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit about your life and all the things that you've learned and how you got to where you are today. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Until next time, everyone, you're listening to Unscripted with Russo.